Boa tarde e bem-vindos à apresentação do Estudo Civic Space Scan, Portugal, um relatório promovido pela AMA através do LabX com o Observatório do Espaço Cívico da OCDE. Para dar início a esta sessão, convido ao púlpito o Sr. Secretário de Estado da Digitalização e da Modernização Administrativa, Mário Campo Largo.
Muito boa tarde a todos. Caro Presidente da Agência para a Modernização Administrativa, João Dias, também, embora não esteja aqui connosco, os caros colegas do Conselho Diretivo, a Elsa e o Tito, let me have a few words in English to welcome and say hello to Deputy Director of OECD, Gillian Dorner, dear leaders of the clusters for civic, space and government services at OECD, Claire McVoy and Seung-Yu Park, caras e caros representantes de instituições públicas e demais entidades, caras e caros membros da equipa do LabX, minhas senhoras e meus senhores. O compromisso de Portugal com a abrangência e qualidade dos seus serviços públicos é longo. Os sucessivos governos deste país têm, nos últimos anos, tido nos serviços públicos um dos seus principais focos. O investimento na sua qualidade é um dos 4 eixos de atuação rumo a uma boa governança que definimos no programa do Governo. Temos assumido como desígnio a captação de talento e a sua fixação na administração pública, porque o talento é um dos pilares para que os serviços públicos sejam mais qualificados e capazes de dar as respostas que os cidadãos e as empresas querem e exigem. Respostas com celeridade, com eficácia e também com proximidade. Exemplo claro desse esforço é a contratação de 1000 novos técnicos superiores, que decorreu em novembro e que teve, aliás, devo dizer, uma procura massiva. É com este sangue novo que esperamos continuar o trabalho bem-sucedido de simplificar, de uniformizar e de desmaterializar serviços e atendimento, aproveitando as oportunidades da sociedade digital para servir melhor as pessoas e as empresas. Nesta matéria, aliás, Portugal tem-se destacado internacionalmente como uma das 10 nações mais avançadas a nível digital e foi, inclusivamente, país anfitrião este ano do encontro anual das Digital Nations. Importa também salientar que Portugal se posiciona bem em índices internacionais de governação digital, como o e-Government Benchmark 2022, e a própria OCDE destaca-nos como um top performer em vários rankings de participação cívica, como o do Varieties of Democracy Institute, normalmente conhecido por VIDEM. E além destas evidências, este saber fazer digital foi essencial para que durante a pandemia tantos serviços continuassem a ser prestados de uma forma eficiente. Portugal nunca parou, invocando e inovando nas respostas que podem ser dadas pelo digital e por um presencial cada vez mais próximo do cidadão e das empresas. Todavia, minhas caras e meus caros, a ambição para os nossos serviços é tão forte quanto a noção que este será sempre um trabalho inacabado. À medida que a tecnologia avança e os nossos recursos aumentam, permitindo-nos ir mais longe e servir melhor, também a sociedade e o país mudam. E com eles, as necessidades, as expectativas das pessoas. E se é para as pessoas que trabalhamos, nunca deixaremos de estar atentos aos desafios com que lidam diariamente na sua interação com o Estado. É essa a grande mais-valia que o relatório do espaço cívico português nos traz. Ao fazer uma análise de prestação dos serviços públicos através da lente dos peritos externos e, obviamente, independentes, permite-nos ter um retrato do que estamos a fazer bem, do que podemos fazer ainda melhor e, fundamentalmente, que recomendações práticas devemos adotar para aumentar a inclusão, a capacitação, a equidade. Digo mais. Este relatório assinala a sólida cultura de serviço público que existe em Portugal, destacando claramente o esforço de descentralização nos municípios através da rede de espaços e lojas de cidadão que providenciam serviços de proximidade. Destaca ainda o compromisso do Governo, nos últimos 8 anos, em colocar as pessoas no centro da sua estratégia, ao melhorar a concepção e a prestação de serviços com o Simplex, com o Mosaico ou com a publicação dos princípios orientadores para uma abordagem dos serviços públicos baseada nos direitos humanos. Regozijamo-nos com o mérito reconhecido ao programa Simplex e ao site Portugal, bem como aos 2 casos de estudo do relatório, a nossa chave móvel digital e o sistema de atribuição automática de abono de família a crianças e jovens. A OCDE reconhece que a liderança política de Portugal tem defendido consistentemente a transformação do funcionamento do Estado, centrado nas pessoas, e que existe um historial de valorização da governação aberta e de planos de ação ambiciosos, por exemplo, no contexto da Open Government Partnership, que promovem a transparência e também a responsabilização. Devo dizer, aliás, que o modo de pensar Simplex é algo que já faz parte do ADN da administração pública portuguesa e que representa em si uma das nossas maiores vitórias e, diria também, um legado permanente. É com o mote de dizer sim às pessoas que recentemente conseguimos que mais de 120 mil pessoas idosas tivessem os seus medicamentos comparticipados na hora, de forma automatizada, suprindo fosses de desigualdade e de exclusão no acesso ao tratamento de saúde. Uma medida que, aliás, devo dizer, ganhou o primeiro prémio da Associação Portuguesa para a Promoção e Desenvolvimento da Sociedade da Informação, na categoria Proximidade com o Cidadão e Sociedade mais Inclusiva. É também com base neste modo que o Governo lançou, por exemplo, o Consulado Virtual, que disponibiliza aos cidadãos nacionais residentes no estrangeiro um conjunto de serviços e informações que anteriormente eram só acessíveis em postos consulares. E a estes podemos juntar tantos outros, como o Nascer Mais Cidadão e Mais Cidadã, a renovação automática da Carta de Condução e a digitalização dos exames médicos. Exemplos da manutenção de um Estado social ainda mais justo, mais próximo e mais inovador. Mas teremos sempre que continuar a ser zeladores ativos da nossa democracia, assegurando a liberdade de imprensa, o reforço das organizações da sociedade civil, das instituições, bem como a robustez dos quadros legais e infraestruturas essenciais à cibersegurança dos indivíduos. É por todas estas razões que é tão importante Portugal ter esta avaliação da OCDE. Esta, no seu relatório, reflete, por um lado, a transparência governamental e a responsabilidade dos órgãos públicos perante a sociedade e é também, devo dizê-lo, um estímulo para que sempre as reforcemos. Estas recomendações estão alinhadas com aquela que é a visão do país, mas também a da Europa. Eu diria também a das Nações Unidas, sobre o ênfase necessário aos direitos humanos, numa era em que os serviços digitais são centrais para acelerar a resolução dos problemas e em que a inteligência artificial é, por exemplo, uma das tecnologias emergentes que marca o design dos serviços, não só do futuro, mas diria mesmo já da atualidade. É aqui que a aplicação dos nossos princípios orientadores, baseados nos direitos humanos, é basilar e reafirma todo o seu significado. Mas é também aqui que há margem para evoluir. E é precisamente o que foi garantido para o futuro com o financiamento que asseguramos via o instrumento de assistência técnica da Comissão Europeia. Estaremos, através da AMA, com a Espanha, os Países Baixos e a Albânia, a investigar a utilização de tecnologias como a inteligência artificial ou a realidade aumentada na promoção da participação cidadã. Mas também estaremos a avançar com o projeto Matrix for Innovation in Public Services, que nasce da Task Force de Serviços Públicos Digitais do Civic, em conjunto com a OCDE. Caras e caros, este trabalho só se tornou possível por resultado da colaboração com um leque muito vasto de entidades, de representantes das diversas áreas governativas, de prestadores de serviços públicos e outras organizações públicas relevantes, a quem devo dizer que agradeço imenso a sua colaboração. To OECD, in the person of Gillian Dorner, I thank for being with us today, even at a distance, and I want to show my deepest appreciation and gratitude for the wonderful work and set of recommendations the SCAN provides to Portugal, thanks to the expertise of the excellent collaborators of the Observatory of Public Service Innovation. E por último, permitam-me felicitar a EMA e muito particularmente a equipa do LabX por ter percebido a importância deste instrumento e ter tornado este relatório possível, num quadro de cooperação próxima com as entidades portuguesas, mas também com a OCDE. O LabX dispõe agora de um manancial de recomendações para aprofundar junto às várias entidades da administração pública e que vai reforçar mais ainda o papel diferenciador que tem e cada vez deve ter mais no nosso país enquanto laboratório de experimentação e inovação. Por isso, vos agradecendo and thanking again to OECD for the report that is not just inspirational, it will be used to improve our situation for the future. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
Obrigado, Sr. Secretário de Estado. Junta-se agora a nós Gillian Dorner, Deputy Director, Public Governance Directorate da OCDE, para uma breve intervenção, à qual seguirá a apresentação dos resultados do Civic Space Scan Portugal, feita por Claire McCoy, Cluster Lead Civic Space, Public Governance Directorate, e Seong Park, Cluster Lead Government Services, Public Governance Directorate da OCDE. Hello, Gillian, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, and thank you, Secretary of State Campo Largo. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, maybe not in person, but to be here virtually to launch the OECD review of civic space in Portugal. This is the first of its kind, and I should start by saying that Portugal really is at the frontier in this area, looking at how to harness civic space in the design of public services reform to ensure that they're people-centered and rights-based. I'd like to really congratulate Portugal on its leadership in this area. As a member of the OECD's Working Party on Open Government and the Working Party on Senior Digital Government Officials, what we call e-leaders, Portugal has embarked on an ambitious reform process to place citizens at the centre of service design and delivery reforms. This review outlines the ways that Portugal has been championing pioneering efforts that recognise civic space and human rights as central to achieving people-centred reforms. Your guiding principles for a human rights-based approach on public services deserve particular recognition. So too do the many channels through which citizens can interact with the state, including through ePortugal.gov and the network of citizen shops and citizen spots. Portugal scores highly in international rankings in terms of overall access, delivery and quality of services. Portugal's digitalisation and decentralisation of public service delivery across its 18 regions and 308 municipalities is equally impressive. The review includes a focus on two of Portugal's services, that is the digital mobile key and the family benefit for children and young people. Based on the assessment of these, the OECD made recommendations to improve the design and delivery of public services more broadly. The analysis provides recommendations on how Portugal can promote inclusion, empowerment and equity in the way services are designed and delivered in the digital age and in the context of demographic shifts, and how protecting civic space enables government services to respond more effectively to users' needs. It offers a unique perspective that is widely applicable, not just for the public sector in Portugal, but also for other OECD countries seeking to make their services more responsive and proactive. These lessons are invaluable in the context of recent challenges such as COVID-19, geopolitical tensions, economic crises, and climate change, which have contributed to waning levels of citizens' trust in government. The 2021 OECD Trust Survey revealed that only 4 out of 10 respondents across OECD countries trusted their governments. More than half felt that the political system did not let them have a say in the government's decision-making. And young people, women, and disadvantaged groups have much lower levels of trust in government. The OECD Trust Survey was carried out in OECD member countries, but the message is universal. Citizens expect public institutions that are resilient, effective, and inclusive, underpinned by the values of integrity and transparency, responsive to citizens' needs and concerns in a context of aging populations and demographic shifts. Ambitious governance reforms, such as those being led by Portugal, are critical to ensure that public institutions are resilient in the face of global challenges and can deliver for citizens. Public services are a priority for the OECD as part of our Reinforcing Democracy initiative. This initiative aims to foster global dialogue, provide evidence-based guidance, and share best practices to strengthen public institutions in order to boost trust in government and promote democratic resilience. We know that public services play a crucial role in strengthening trust in governments. They not only act as an essential channel for interactions between governments and citizens, but also provide significant opportunities for fostering positive and meaningful relationships between public institutions and the people that they serve. Governments have prioritised the needs and expectations of users when designing and delivering public services. Nevertheless, to achieve a greater impact, we need more profound systemic changes that can achieve transformative results across the whole of government. The OECD very much looks forward to continuing to support Portugal in this respect, with a project on improving citizen participation with emerging technologies. This 3-country technical support instrument project kicked off on November the 13th, and over the next 20 months, Portugal, through the AMA, together with the Netherlands and Spain, is taking the lead to explore innovative ways to improve citizen participation through emerging technologies. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the results of that. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Elsa Bello and George Lagarto and the team at the Administrative Modernisation Agency, and for their strategic and continuous leadership on this project. By working together, we can agree on common standards and gain a better understanding of what works and what doesn't in public service reforms. This will help us to design and implement better policies for better lives and ultimately foster more trust among citizens that governments are equipped to respond to the major challenges of our time. So thank you very much. Continue to be at the frontier. We were very, very happy to do this this project with you, and it being the first of its kind, and we look forward very much to working with you as we move forward. So now let me hand over now to Claire McAvoy and to Sungju Park to tell you more about the findings of this report.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today to walk you through some of our key findings. So we are going to spend approximately the next 20 minutes telling you about the overall aims of this pilot project, a little bit about the methodology, our outputs, our findings on how to create the conditions for more people-centered services, our findings on the extent to which the guiding principles are being applied in practice in Portugal, and then our overall recommendations, which are then applicable across the public sector. So this review, as you've heard, it's the first of its kind. It brings together the OECD's work on the protection of civic space and its work on digital transformation of governments for the very first time. So we're very excited to launch it today with you. So let's start with a reminder of the aims of this pilot project, which you can see on the top of the screen there. So the aim was basically to assess how protected civic space, based of course on fundamental human rights, can contribute to more inclusive, people-centered services. And by that we mean whether these rights are indeed respected in practice, so that stakeholders and citizens can contribute to the reform process. So as we've heard, and as we know, Portugal launched its guiding principles in 2021, and noting the similarities between the guiding principles and the OECD's work on civic space, they invited us to do this study. And for those of you who are short on time, in addition to launching this larger report today, we also have a very nice, much shorter highlights document. We will put a link into the chat here for you, and we invite you to take a look. It's shorter and it's more accessible. So I should add that this work was conducted by the OECD's Public Governance Directorate, and that it is anchored in 2 OECD initiatives: the OECD Recommendation on Open Government, which is a standard, and then the OECD's Reinforcing Democracy Initiative that Gillian just mentioned. So before we get into our findings, let me just say a brief word about the methodology. We used a wide range of tools and methods to gather information for this report, and these included a self-assessment from the government, a fact-finding mission, as part of which we interviewed people from 39 institutions and organizations, among which 15 civil society organizations. Of course, we conducted a wide-ranging legal review and review of strategies and other government documents. We held an online public consultation. We consulted service blueprints on the 2 services that we were asked to look at in detail, and these we've already heard them mentioned. They're on the bottom of the screen there: the digital mobile key and the family benefit for children and young people. And we also consulted survey data, and based on all of the above, we made our assessment. Estonia and the United Kingdom contributed to this analysis also as peer reviewers, providing analytical inputs and good practices from their countries. So as we've heard, Portugal over the last decade has really been a leader. It has embarked on a really ambitious process to transform the delivery and design of its public services. And of course, AMA has been at the forefront of those efforts. And this vision of reforming public services has been mainstreamed into a wide number of policy and strategy documents, some of which are listed in front of you on your screens. The Simplex program has been particularly successful at facilitating cooperation and collaboration across organizational boundaries. And of course, since 2018, Portugal in parallel has promoted the decentralization of its public services. And all of these efforts together have allowed Portugal to really make significant progress in terms of improving the interface between the state and the public and its citizens. And more recently then, the guiding principles provide a roadmap to usher in a new generation of rights-based services. So one of the first questions we had to ask ourselves when we embarked on this project was how to create the conditions for people-centered services. What does it mean? What needs to be in place? And there are 5 key areas that we're going to walk you through today. The protection of human rights, equality and non-discrimination, participation of citizens and stakeholders in public service reforms, an enabling environment for civil society so that they can participate in the process, and finally, digital security, inclusion, and people-centered use of technologies. And so when these are in place, then we see significant progress in terms of reforms. And we're going to walk through each of these now in a little bit more detail and our findings. So the very good news is that Portugal, in general, in Portugal, civic space is actually very well protected. Data we already heard from the Varieties of Democracy Index shows that Portugal scores highly, and in fact higher than OECD and EU averages in the Freedom of Expression Index, as one example, although there was a drop in somewhat in 2022, and there are some challenges related to implementation of access to information legal frameworks. Likewise, over the past decade, Portugal has been a leader, has consistently ranked very highly in the VDEM index measuring protection of peaceful assembly. Although, as again in many OECD members, there was a recent decline as a result of the COVID pandemic and the necessary lockdowns and restrictions. So we saw a drop there. Equality and non-discrimination are essential to service delivery and design, because when these are enforced, they can provide protection to marginalized groups who may not be able to access services as easily as others. So it's essential that teams developing services and designing them consider from the outset which groups in society are less able to access services and why, and to seek to overcome these obstacles. So in the context of Portugal's changing demography, Portugal has made considerable efforts to support vulnerable population groups, notably, as an example, migrants and refugees, including by providing one-stop services to them. And there are also multiple active municipal plans for the integration of these groups, but still they face obstacles or challenges in encountering or in accessing public services on an equal basis with others. And overall, we noted some challenges related to discrimination and exclusion. And you can see some of the official data there on the screen showing complaints received by the Commission for Equality and Against Racial Discrimination and Racial and Religious Discrimination Crimes. And as in all OECD members, related challenges hinder certain groups in society from being able to access services on an equal basis, as I said. Now, the guiding principles, as you are all aware, recognise the importance of participation in public service reforms, and in particular, principles 1 and 8 that you see on your screens. And these actually call on all public sector providers to promote participation in the process at all stages, and to develop the capacities of rights holders. And of course, the rights holders are the people of Portugal, the population. A wide variety of mechanisms and tools exist in Portugal to encourage participation in public services and public service reforms. And these include feedback mechanisms, the participa.gov online platform, consultations with end users, surveys, evaluations, the electronic yellow book, etc. And LabX, of course, has been pioneering efforts to embed participation in the design and testing of public services. Involving civil society in these processes is particularly important, and a strong enabling environment allows civil society to partner with government, and of course is fundamental to protected civic space. And there was a consensus during our research that civil society in Portugal has fulfilled a primary role in bridging service delivery gaps, particularly in the social sector, in advocating for the needs of vulnerable groups, and in acting as watchdogs. And freedom of association is generally well protected in Portugal, and indeed there is a vibrant civil society community. And Portugal is above or in line with the OECD average in terms of the general environment in which CSOs operate. And on your screen, you can see 3 indices there showing very low levels of what is called CSO repression, good levels of consultation with civil society on policy issues, and a robust sector overall. And I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, who's going to tell you more about digital security and inclusion, and then we will come back to me for our overall conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. One indicator for the effectiveness of public sector transformation is the maturity of governments to leverage data and technology to deliver a whole of government and human-centric digital transformation. The OECD Digital Government Index assesses this maturity according to the 6 dimensions of the OECD Digital Government Policy Framework. As you can see on your screen, in the pilot edition of the index, Portugal ranked 10th among 33 participating countries. Portugal ranked in the top 10 for 4 of the 6 dimensions, including 3rd place for government as a platform. Portugal's strength in these areas allowed for the use of emerging technologies and data to create proactive services that meet needs without users having to engage government in the first place. On the other hand, Portugal's performance is less impressive and user-driven and open by default. These are areas where the linkage between digital government and civic space is at its strongest. Being user-driven is a crucial aspect of inclusive, people-centered public services. This ambition is contained within several strategic documents mentioned before by Claire and also discussed more fully in the report. However, the DGI highlights 3 areas on which Portugal could place more focus: structured guidelines for engaging users, connecting work on digital devices across government, and coherently measuring satisfaction. Portugal's lowest performance in the DGI is in the area of open by default. This dimension looks at how government data and policymaking processes, including algorithms, are made available for the public, within the limits of existing legislation and in balance with the national and public interest. This is a crucial aspect of protected civic space, as it allows people to inform themselves about public policy making and to take informed positions in public debates. Portugal's weaker position in this dimension echoes the findings of the 2019 OECD Open, Useful, and Reusable Data Index, where Portugal scored below the OECD average and was ranked 23rd out of 34 countries. Portugal underperformed in terms of data availability and government support for the reuse of data. While efforts have been made to promote open data reuse outside the public sector, the total level of support, including open data training, remains low and reflects a gap between the stated strategic ambition for inclusive engagement and actual involvement of citizens and civil society. Over the years, Portugal has made significant progress in digitalizing public services. There are more than 1,768 services accessible on the eportugal.gov portal, and also government has taken important actions to secure personal data in compliance with the GDPR, and digital inclusion continues to be a top priority for the government. However, there are discrepancies in digital skills among diverse demographics, and unequal access to digital public services requires further attention. Another factor to underline here is trust in digital technologies. As you can see in the graph, low trust in digital technologies can hinder the uptake of digital services. Worries around cybersecurity dangers, such as phishing, denial of services, and ransomware attacks, can discourage individuals from taking advantage of digital public services. Now that we have covered the general conditions for making services more people-focused, let us look at our findings on how Portugal is implementing the guiding principles in the 2 services we were asked to assess: the digital mobile key and the family benefit for children and young people. The review examined each service and found that 2 of the principles are met, 5 are partially met, and 2 are not met. The 2 that are met cover privacy and personal data protection, as well as tackling misuse cases. The 5 that are partially met cover the promotion of participation at all stages of the process, designing for communities in vulnerable situations, promoting continuous monitoring and assessment, developing rights holders and duty bearers' capacities, and ensuring transparency. Overall, it is our assessment that the guiding principles have great potential to bring significant benefits to Portugal's public service design and delivery, but that it will take sustained effort and commitment from public servants and policymakers to fully realize these benefits. Now I will hand it back to Claire to share with you overall recommendations to support Portugal in these efforts. Claire.
So overall, the review finds that Portugal has made significant strides in developing a strong foundation for service reforms in terms of both protecting and harnessing its civic space and providing leadership at a political and organizational level for these reforms. And based on our analysis of the two services and of civic space protection, we conclude now with our 13 overall recommendations, which are applicable across the entire public sector. And while these are equally important, I should stress, I'm just in the interest of time going to focus on 5 of them now. And we invite you to consult them in the highlights and in the document itself. So number 3 focuses on inclusion, which I've spoken a little bit about before. Besides the ad hoc consultations that already take place, there is a need, we found, for more systematic monitoring of who can access services in Portugal, which groups are excluded and why, and which groups are providing feedback and then responding to that feedback. Number 4 focuses on facilitating civil society collaboration and leadership. There was a resounding plea from the civil society organizations that we spoke with for more proactive and consistent engagement with them in relation to public service reforms, and also potentially to consider the creation of an advisory board that would institutionalize their participation in ongoing processes. Number 10 focuses on developing a consistent narrative and methodology for the reforms that are ongoing, that the entire public sector recognizes and endorses. And this is really important. So we found that at a strategic and political level, there has been a consistent approach in the language that is used to describe the ambition for the reforms, but this is not matched with a consistent methodology among practitioners. And so it's essential moving forward that individual initiatives such as the guiding principles and indeed the common model are brought together into a clearly communicated national agenda for change. And then for AMA's vision for the future of public services to translate into everyday practice, it will be essential to disseminate the guiding principles more widely and to ensure that AMA and indeed all public servants who are involved have the necessary tools and backing to fulfill their role. Number 12 focuses on another key area, performance targets. So we found that there was a need to increase the frequency and availability of performance reporting and also strong reporting metrics and targets. And then finally, number 13, which I wanted to emphasize, was on the need to continue monitoring civic space protection so that any restrictions that may emerge over time can be addressed. And this is really important so that moving forward, the conditions continue to be in place for the ongoing reforms to achieve a maximum impact. So on that note, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to all of you for listening. We know that there's quite a lot in the report. We hope we haven't overloaded you. We hope it all makes sense. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.
Thank you, Claire and Seong, for this useful explanation. O Civic Space Scan resultou em recomendações que visam melhorar a prestação dos serviços públicos em Portugal, a par da promoção da transformação digital. Para encerrar este evento e nos dar a conhecer aquele que tem sido o trabalho da Agência para a Modernização Administrativa na aplicação destes resultados, chamo ao púlpito o Presidente da AMA, João Dias.
Ora, muito boa tarde. Senhor Secretário de Estado, colegas da Administração, os colegas da AMA e da OCDE. Gostaria de começar por agradecer ao Sr. Secretário de Estado ter estado aqui hoje na AMA, nesta sessão de abertura, e pelas palavras inspiradoras que nos deixou. Muito obrigado. I would also like to thank the OECD colleagues for doing this work with AMA and for being part of this session. I just met some of you a few weeks ago in the OECD leaders meeting in Santiago, Chile. So it's nice to see you again. I was in a panel with Barbara as well. So thank you so much. And thank you, Gillian Dorner, for the presentation on the OECD's roles in helping governments design and implement strategic, evidence-based and innovative policies to strengthen public governance. Also, thank you, Claire McVoy and Sung-Yu Park, for the presentation on the Civic scan in Portugal. Your contributions were very positive and provided valuable insights for all of us here. Voltando agora aqui ao português, é um gosto e é um orgulho fazer a apresentação, estarmos aqui na apresentação dos resultados deste estudo. Como já foi dito aqui, o Civic Space Scan tem como objetivo principal diagnosticar a situação da administração aberta e dos direitos humanos no desenho de serviços e das políticas públicas em Portugal. E no fundo resultou aqui de um trabalho pioneiro do AFX, que teve origem aqui num projeto no âmbito do projeto Nunca Esquecer. E, acima de tudo, estes resultados, mais do que fazer um diagnóstico do que temos hoje, valem muito como pistas para o futuro, não é? E neste nosso ADN de melhoria contínua e de procurarmos ir sempre mais além e de termos cada vez mais estes princípios aqui, digamos, no nosso top of mind. Deste relatório já falámos, destacam-se 3 vetores de atuação fundamentais para Portugal. Como é que podemos ainda ter mais serviços centrados nas pessoas e nos direitos humanos, como é que podemos criar um ambiente para que mais entidades da sociedade civil possam participar no desenho e na prestação de serviços públicos, e 3, que o desenho e a entrega de serviços públicos em Portugal sejam cada vez mais inclusivos, acessíveis e baseados nos direitos humanos. E isto são diretrizes fundamentais para moldar o futuro do país e promover aqui uma administração mais aberta e centrada nas pessoas. E é por isso também que, já tendo em conta os resultados deste estudo, que a AMA iniciou 2 novos projetos que visam resolver algumas destas recomendações, em particular 2 que já foram faladas: o Improving Civic Participation with Emerging Technologies, e vocês sabem o quanto nós somos adeptos das novas tecnologias, e por isso tudo o que seja tecnologias para ajudar a participação dos cidadãos e o envolvimento da sociedade, por nós são bem vistas. A este propósito eu gostava de falar de que, como sabem, também falei at the OECD Leaders Meeting in our virtual assistant powered by AI, with ChatGPT. No fundo, é uma forma de termos a tecnologia ao serviço da administração pública e fazendo chegar a mais pessoas. E agora vamos pôr o nosso avatar a falar em mais de 20 línguas para ajudar no contacto com os cidadãos estrangeiros, que são muito, digamos, uma nova segmento da procura que estamos a enfrentar. Este é um projeto, e depois há o outro do Metrics for Innovation in Public Services, também já foi falado. A ideia é termos um framework, não é, para avaliar a maturidade da inovação dos serviços públicos. É também uma forma estruturada e contínua de termos cada vez serviços mais inovadores, não é? E, no fundo, estes são 2 exemplos do que já estamos a fazer com base neste estudo. E, no fundo, aqui a mensagem é que o nosso compromisso é de melhoria constante, mas mais do que isso, fazer uma verdadeira transformação digital da administração pública portuguesa e nós sermos aquele farol, aquele motor, aquele maestro que garante que toda a orquestra, não é, que são as várias entidades da administração pública, vão trabalhando de forma coordenada neste sentido. E por isso I'm switching to English, but I believe this is not in the notes that we share with the OECD. These concepts like people-centered, human rights-based, co-creation are parts of AMA's DNA. And we truly believe that these are key to provide better digital public services. And we really believe that citizens should be placed at the center of the design, the implementation, and assessment of public services. And our aim is to go to what we call personalized, automatic, and proactive public services, digital public services. And so we are working with other entities. We are creating this methodology, which is the basis of Simplex, where we have a methodology to work with cross-government, with all other public entities, in order to design public services and to redesign the workflows to make it very easy to the end user, so that with one click, he can get the service delivered. And actually, and when we say proactive, so it is the public administration that tells the citizen that he has something to do with any public entity. So this is our goal: personalized, proactive, and automated public services. It's our new paradigm that we are working for. E no fundo, nós trabalhamos porque existem cidadãos e a nossa grande motivação é servir melhor, é entregar melhor, é poder ser cada vez mais uma entidade de excelência, e acreditamos que desta forma vamos poder continuar a inovar. E por isso só gostava de encerrar aqui esta sessão, no fundo dizendo que é um orgulho para a AMA, e enquanto Presidente da AMA e representando esta casa, que de facto tem esta dinâmica e tem este ADN de inovação e de querer sempre estar na linha da frente, de prestar melhores serviços. É uma honra saber que isto existe nesta casa e que somos este motor de levar toda a administração pública neste sentido. E também, só para terminar, dizer e reafirmar o empenho, estou eu a falar, mas sinto que é o empenho de todos os que estão nesta sala e todos os que estão nesta casa, em ter este ADN de inovação, de melhoria constante, continuar a fazer mais e melhor, que não nos resignamos, nunca achamos que é suficiente, queremos sempre ir mais além, e por isso vamos continuar este trabalho, vamos continuar a seguir as recomendações da OCDE e vamos continuar a ter serviços públicos mais inclusivos, mais acessíveis e cada vez mais centrados nas pessoas e conseguindo um maior envolvimento de todos. E por isso, mesmo para terminar, agradecer a todos este esforço conjunto, a todos os colegas da AMA, muito obrigado por este empenho, a todas as outras entidades da administração pública. No fundo, isto é um trabalho coletivo e é um trabalho de cooperação e de cocriação. A todos os cidadãos que também têm participado nas nossas sessões e, no fundo, acreditamos que é só com este esforço conjunto e é só trabalhando verdadeiramente de mãos dadas que conseguimos, de facto, levar a excelência dos serviços públicos mais adiante e melhorar a nossa administração. Mais uma vez agradecer a todas as equipas da AMA, em particular ao APX, agradecer também to our OECD colleagues for trusting Portugal and AMA. We hope to continue working with you, and agradecer ao Sr. Secretário de Estado e ao seu gabinete também toda a confiança e o trabalho conjunto. And at the end of the day, if you follow your recommendations, that we will, we believe we can follow your signature and get better policies for better lives. Thank you so much. Boa tarde.